Hi, I'm Luke Alexander, CEO of Newcore Gold, with a March update for investors. First thing I'll highlight is that I will be making some forward-looking statements in this presentation. Newcore Gold, we've got a district-scale exploration project, the Enchi project in Ghana. We're an advanced stage exploration company. Got 5 rigs turning at the moment, 58,000 meter program, which is the largest ever program on the project. Looking at some of the key things that I think set Newcore apart, we've got a very strong management team and board with a proven track record of making shareholders money, very well backed by institutional shareholders, currently owned about 35% of the company. We are incentivized as a management team and board through our 32% ownership in the business. Ghana, it's a great place to operate. It's Africa's largest gold producer, and with that comes a huge amount of in-country expertise for us to leverage off of. We've got a 1.2 million ounce inferred resource at the moment. One of the keys to this resource is that it's primarily oxide and transitional material, which means it lends itself to lower capex heap leach processing. We've currently got a 58,000 meter drill program, which is the largest ever on the project. Really good tight capital structure, just under 100 million shares outstanding and no warrants. And we think gold is a great place to be invested at the moment with what's going on in the world. Looking at the board and management team in a little bit more detail, here's a number of the companies that we've been involved in and have been successful with over the past number of years. My personal background, I come from 15 years on the investment banking sell side of the business, worked with companies who've got assets around the world, ASX, TSX, London listed companies, spent 12 years living in London, advising large institutional natural resource investors in both the UK and Europe. That's where I got to know a lot of the team here and worked closely with a lot of the companies that we've got listed on this page. In terms of some of the other management team, Danny Lee, he's our CFO. Danny's got over 15 years of experience, worked with a number of different companies around the world. Greg Smith, he's our VP Exploration. He's got over 35 years of exploration experience, has worked in these types of deposits around the world, and has been involved in our Enchi project for the past 10 years. Mal Carvasca, she's a key part of the executive team. She heads up our corporate development efforts as well as IR. She comes from a private equity background and has worked with a number of different companies. And Dan Wilson, he's our in-country manager. He's worked on and off on this project for the past 25 years and has been with us for the past 10 years. So again, management and the board, I think, are one of the things that really differentiate Newcore from a number of other companies our size. ESG is something that's very important to us. As a result, we are trying to adhere to as many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as possible. Some of the things that we're doing on the site, on the project and around the project, donating computers to local schools, installing water wells in villages where they don't have access to clean water, as well as upgrading roads and bridges to give locals better access to move their product and for the various farmers. COVID's something that's top of mind for us. We want to make sure that our employees and local communities are safe. So we've got all the policies and procedures in place to keep people safe, including temperature checks, hand washing stations, all the kind of stuff you'd expect. Looking at the capital structure in a little bit more detail. So as I mentioned, just under 100 million shares outstanding, very well aligned management and board through our 32% ownership of the business. Institutionally investor owned 35%. Number of these groups down here are groups that I worked with for the past 10 or 15 years. And when they heard I was joining as CEO and Doug was stepping up, Doug Forrester stepping up as chairman and Greg Smith was coming back full-time VPX, were quite keen to get involved and invested in the company. We're also very well covered from a research perspective. We've got 5 tier 1 investment banks who currently follow us, and you can see a number of those here. And if you've got relationships with any of these groups, I'd encourage you to go and look at the research. Looking at Ghana, as I mentioned, our view is it's a tier 1 jurisdiction to be operating in. It is globally the 7th largest gold producer. It's Africa's largest gold producer, producing about 5 million ounces per year. With that, you get a very well-aligned government. It's important for jobs in country as well as the tax base, and it's a great place for us to be operating, and we're lucky that we were able to amass such a large land package when we did. We're situated in the southwest corner of the country. If we zoom in and have a little closer look, we're actually situated on one of two prolific belts that run through the country, the Sefwi-Bibiani belt. Directly to the north of us, about 50 kilometers, you've got Kinross's Chirano mine. It produces about 200,000 ounces per year, sits at an endowment of 5.5 million ounces. To the north of that, you've got Bibiani at 6.5. And to the north of that, Ahafo at about a 15.5 million. So very large deposits in country. Directly on the other side of the Côte d'Ivoire or the Ghana border, you've got Côte d'Ivoire, and you've got Endeavour's Afema asset, which they've been talking very positively about. So great to have these neighbors in country as well as on the other side of the border from us. Looking at our Enchi project in a little bit more detail. As you can see here, it's 216 square kilometers, so a very large package. From the north to the south, you've got about 40 kilometers in length. We've to date identified 25 targets, of which we've only drilled on 6 of them, and 3 of them make up our current 1.22 million ounce inferred resource. If you look at that 1.22 million ounce inferred resources, one of the things I'll highlight right away is that 95% of it sits within the oxide and transitional categories. What's important about that is that means it lends itself well to a heap leach operation, which is a much lower capex way of mining. So that's a key differentiator for our current resource. Looking at all the historical drilling that's been done that makes up that inferred resource, you've got about 49 or 50,000 meters that feeds that resource. So needless to say, the current 58,000 meter program that we're doing at the moment is very significant, and we think will add meaningfully to that resource. Looking at our current 58,000 meter program, we've currently to date released about a third of the results from the 58,000 meter program. And we've been very pleased with the results that we've got to date. If we look at some of those in a little bit more detail, looking at our Boeing deposit, which sits at about 530,000 ounces, we've currently put out about 51 holes at Boeing. Seum is actually our largest deposit. It sits at 535,000 ounces, and we've released 31 holes to date, as well as Nyam, which is our smallest deposit at 155,000 ounces, and we've put out 8 holes. So that represents about 70% of all the holes that we've currently put out. They're all step out holes, so we think they will ultimately add to resource. And we will continue to drill at all 3 of these areas and look to continue to step out in the first half of this year. The other 25 or 30% of our program was focused on previously drilled areas. So areas like Kojina Hill, which we've had good past success. We did follow-up drilling, and we're very happy with the 9 holes that we drilled there in 2020. And we'll do additional drilling in the first half of this year, as well as Kwachikroom. Kwachikroom, historically, we drilled about 17 holes. We've drilled an additional 27 holes to date, and we expect that Kwachikroom will ultimately be our next resource area given the success that we've been having there. In terms of the drilling that we've done there, we've identified about a 650 meters of mineralization along a 2.5 kilometer anomaly. So we'll continue to step out to the north and south and look to continue to have success at Kwachikroom. And then there's a number of other areas that have never been drilled before, which we'll look to drill for the first time in the first half of this year. Looking at some of the things that work well from an exploration perspective, airborne geophysics, you can see that the anomalies really line up well from an airborne geophysics, or light up well from an airborne geophysics perspective. And if we then compare that to the tens of thousands of soil samples that we've done across the property, you can see that they line up very well with the airborne work that we've done. So those are a couple of things that work from an exploration perspective. Looking at our property and how we systematically approach exploration in a little bit more detail. On the right, you've got our Enchi project. First thing I'll talk about is infrastructure. Running directly through the middle of our property, you've got a paved road that's got a power line running beside it, takes you to the town of Enchi. You can drive 100 kilometers along that road. Enchi's got about 15,000 people. So all the kind of support services we could want for our project. About 5 kilometers outside of town, you've got our core shack. 10 minutes from there, along a dirt gravel road, you're standing on top of our Boyne deposit. Another 10 minutes from there, NCAU, and then throughout the rest of the property, you've got dirt and gravel roads. So very good infrastructure at our project. Looking at the pyramid here on the left, at the top of it, you've got our 3 deposit areas, which make up that 1.2 million ounce inferred resource. As I mentioned, we are continuing to step out and look to expand resource at these areas, as well as below that, we've got our previously drilled areas. And our goal here is to ultimately move these up the pyramid into the deposit category. I talked about Quachikroom, which we think will be the next one that we add to our deposit category. And over time, we'd hope that with further drilling at Kogina Hill, as well as Arati, we'll get those up the pyramid as well. Below that, we've got our advanced stage targets, Naquanta, Sium South, Tokasia. These are areas where we've done a lot of work from a mapping, trenching perspective, and we will be drilling these areas, look to get them into that drill tested category, and over time move them up the pyramid and into our deposit category. Below that, we've got another kind of 15 or 20 yard targets that we've identified, which we're doing work on, and we'll look to ultimately prioritize which ones we want to drill next. Looking at our 3 deposits in a little bit more detail, Boyne, Sium, and Nyam, which I've talked about, all of them remain open along strike, highlighted by these yellow arrows at each of them. There's also some large gap areas at both Boyne and Sium. We've actually put out a couple of press releases, one on January 7th and one on January 27th, highlighting a bunch of the drilling that we've done in these gap areas that shows that there's continuation of mineralization right through these gaps. And our view is that these will ultimately become larger pits once we're able to get an updated resource done. And this is all considered step out drilling. So we would expect that it adds resource, as well as good results from some of the drilling that we've done along strike as well. So very happy with those results. And as I discussed, to date, the bulk of the drilling that we've done has been focused on the oxide and transitional zone. And if you look at the average depth of that drilling, it's only down to about 50 or 60 meters, making up that 1.22 million ounce resource. And one of the big opportunities for us, and what we've started to drill at the moment, is some deeper holes to start targeting the opportunity at depth. And why is that important? It's important because when you look at these greenstone hosted deposits, and we've looked at a longitudinal section of our Enchi project here, compared that to a longitudinal section of Kinross's Chirano mine about 50 kilometers to the north of us, and where you see these greenstone hosted deposits really grow inside is when you start to get deeper. We've superimposed that oxidization level at our project, and as you can see, 95% of that material sits within that layer. If you compare that to Chirano on this cartoon, you'll see it really highlights what the opportunity at depth is. So for the first time ever, we've started to drill some deeper holes down to kind of 250 to 350 meters vertical. We've started with holes at both Boyne and Sium, and we'll expect to have some results out in the next month or so from some of that drilling. And we'd like to prove up a similar geological model to what you're seeing at Chirano, as well as other greenstone hosted deposits along the Bibiani Shear. So just to recap, I mean, we've got a top tier management team who are very well aligned through our 32% interest in the business, very good capital structure, and very well supported by both institutional investors as well as tier one investment banks. Ghana is a tier 1 jurisdiction and great place to be operating in. And we're very fortunate we were able to amass such a large land package when we did. And our drilling, we're expecting will create significant resource growth, as well as continue to hopefully make some new discoveries. And that's what our main focus is exploration and advancing this project through the drill bit. We will also be putting out an updated PEA in Q2 of this year, and we think that will ultimately create a further underpinning of value for the company. We're always keen to engage with our existing shareholders as well as potential new shareholders. We're very active on social media, so LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube channel, put out lots of content that investors think is very useful. So I'd encourage you to follow us there. I'd also encourage you to visit our website, have a look at some of the information on there, and feel free to reach out anytime. We're always keen to engage with investors. Thank you very much for listening, and please make sure to follow up.